Welcome, Titan 6 Actual and 3GX Mental Performance. Welcome you to Breaking Barriers Beyond the Finish Line. I'm your co-host, Lou Greco from Titan 6 Actual, and alongside me is the brilliant Tara Pipia Snyder from 3GX. In this podcast, we'll dive deep into the human spirit, resilience, and the relentless pursuit of excellence. So whether you're an athlete, an entrepreneur, or simply someone seeking inspiration, this show is for you. We'll explore stories of triumph, setbacks, and unwavering determination that propels us forward. As a retired Army Engineer Reservist, I've faced challenges on the battlefield and beyond, and now I'm on a mission to help you discover your inner type.
And I'm Sarah, also known as Coach Grip, a mental performance coach. Together, we dive into the psychology of peak performance, mindset strategies, and how to overcome mental blocks. Whether you're aiming for the podium or simply striving for personal growth, we've got you covered. Join us as we explore the intersection of physical and mental strength, share expert insights, and celebrate those who go beyond the finish line. So grab your headphones, lace up your sneakers, and let's break barriers together. Remember, it's not just about crossing the finish line, it's about what lies beyond. Welcome to Breaking Barriers Beyond the Finish Line. Stay tuned for upcoming episodes where we'll feature incredible guests, share practical tips, and ignite the fire within you.
All right, we're back once again with Breaking Barriers Beyond the Finish Line. My name is Lou Greco. I'm with my co-host, Tara Pipia Snyder, and we're here to inspire, empower the best version of people, help others do the same by going behind the scenes with folks just like our next guest, Tara Pipia. And Tara, so obviously I'm going to have you, give a little more background about yourself, but from when we met briefly at DEKA Worlds, and you had approached me about putting this Sober Up Spartan Style little card here on my table, and we're like, hey, absolutely. I got to look, and I was like, you know what? I think you'd be a fantastic guest on our podcast. So thank you so much for agreeing to come on. Tara is an Army veteran, originally from New York. Moved out to Cali in 2018, I believe, right? Started with racing with Spartan, then moved over to the DEKA side, which is obviously how we met. And she's also a doctor. What is it now? A transpersonal psychology doctor.
Mm-hmm. Well,
and
go ahead. I was going to clarify that it's not medical doctor, PhD in the research in that field, transpersonal psychology. Yep. Just so no one misinterprets that. Not a medical doctor. That would be nice. Maybe next, maybe next year.
You still earn the title. So with that, thank you so much for coming out again, and give us a little more depth in your own words.
Okay. So you're correct. I moved here in 2018. I'll start from there because that's when everything really shifted for me. I moved to when I say here, California. There's a lot of Spartan races here within a stone's throw. So I started really getting into it. I received my SGX Spartan coaching certificate like years prior and took it and said, I'll never use this. I wish I could, but I was in the military, as you said. And I was like, this will never happen. And sure enough, 2018, it did. And then that took off and just started meeting a lot of people. And when I was racing, that's when I met a few gentlemen that were in recovery and were always on the podium. That's what put the thought in my head. COVID hit, went and got my PhD, and that's where the book came out of, the PhD research on those particular men who overcame addiction and then wound up on the Spartan podium.
Wow. Like, that's very inspiring, that the fact that one simple move changed like a lot for you. And with that, I know like when people talk about psychology, there's so many different forms of psychology. So can you explain a little bit of what transpersonal psychology is?
Sure. So transpersonal psychology is moving beyond the self, beyond the identity. So say I'm a soldier, right? I'm a mom, I'm a dad, all those things we need, right? To just feel grounded and understand ourselves. But it's moving beyond that, beyond the ego, into the higher states of consciousness where I guess some people can call it the mystical realm or spiritual, but it's not necessarily that or religion or anything like that. It's just a higher state of awareness, we'll say. And then there's a lot of focus on universal connection with other people. So again, it's beyond yourself, that we're all in some way united on an energetic level. or spiritual level, however you want to look at it. So part of that is removing the mask, right? Of all these identities that we wear. We need them to like feel safe, but the point of transpersonal psychology is just to let that go, to reach higher states of awareness. And within that is peak experiences. They could be mystical, spiritual, and drugs, ironically, create for many people peak experiences, right? And some people use them in spiritual um, rituals and whatnot. But for me, my peak experiences are with DEKA, Spartan, trail running, marathons. It's not with drugs. So when I was talking to these gentlemen, in the back of my mind, I'm like, you just replace this negative peak experience, because there's always a crash and destruction, with the positive peak experience of not only racing Spartan, but then literally rising up and being on a podium.
Mhm.
So that's what transpersonal psychology is and how it ties into what I was researching.
With being able to have your like research and then being able to go into these races, like you talked about how you met a lot of the people, specifically the podium winners, will say, had some type of like addiction in a sense. So like, can you kind of describe that, of the beginning of how, if anybody, we haven't even, did you even say the title of your book yet? I want to make sure that we don't just start going into it before we talk about your title.
I think Lou did, but I'll show you a visual too. It's Sober Up
Yeah.
Spartan Style. And then the subtitle is Recovery Through Racing.
Yeah. So with that book, what inspired you to like get this idea, talk to everybody from the start line and actually create a way to, touch everybody's heart with this?
Well, great question. Well, my heart was touched when I moved here because I met so many wonderful people. I had no family out here. I just took a chance in 2018, drove across the country with my dog, and I tried to run away at age 7 to California, and that didn't work very well. My mom's like, go ahead, good luck. And I had my suitcase and everything. And I made it up the block. I think I had like one apple in my bag and it was getting dark. I'm like, man, I wanted to save face, but I'm like, I gotta go. Where am I gonna sleep?
It, it,
So that was my
it's the
first.
same tactic. All boomer parents. They're like,
Yeah,
yeah, there's the door. Have fun.
Right.
kind of like reverse psychology because it worked. I had to come back. So finally I made it. It didn't work at 7, but when I came here, I just was embraced by so many people. And the stories just came to me. Honestly, like I had no idea, first of all, I was going to get a PhD. That was the last thing on my mind. I was done with school like 20 years before that. I said I'd never go back. And I'm not in recovery myself. I just kept hearing it so much. And one of the gentlemen in the book, Eddie Sanchez, he was the first one that I met, and his story is in the book. Like I said, it's pretty powerful. So then he introduced me to his friend Dave Lawrence, who had a story more with alcohol. And I think he was 20 years sober at the time. And then Dave introduced me to someone else. So it just kept snowballing. And what inspired me, to your question, was that they had to come up from a place so low that I've never been. I've had my own lows, right? But can't say I had to pick myself up from the bottom. So to
Mhm.
be able to do that, the kind of grit and just fight to come back up and then rise up on the top and be a role model for the Spartan community, it just blew my mind. So I was completely impressed by all of them. Um, because I don't know, I just feel like I've been lucky. Again, I've had my ups and downs, but I've been relatively lucky through my life. I could have chose that path, but I didn't. So it's been pretty good to me, and I know they had some hard times, so it's pretty
Yeah.
inspiring.
And that's why I wanted you to explain. I like how you say, like, I haven't been an addict. I've heard about their stories. And something that I realized is like, sober doesn't really mean that you have to have an alcohol addiction or a drug addiction. And think about like anybody that's listening to this podcast, how this kind of book can apply to them, even if they don't have some type of addiction in that sense. So I remember you telling us a story about you running a race. Can you describe what you were doing to yourself and why your race didn't go the way that it wanted to because of it wasn't your addiction, but at the same time, it was a bad behavior that you didn't want to continue?
Yeah. So that moment, that was a training run for the race, which was the marathon, and it was like an 8 or 10 mile run. So I was sort of new to the running community, and I just started to feel really sick, like, I don't know, 6 miles in or something. Went behind a building, felt like I was going to throw up. My stomach was killing me. I could barely finish, just dragging. I felt horrible, just horrible for the wrong reason. It's one thing to be in a race, and then at the end, you're like, man, you're just giving it your all. That's all you have, but you're your full self. I was not my full self because, to your point, what I did to my body the night before, I went out for happy hour with my friends, drank way too much, stayed out way too late. And again, although that wasn't like something I struggled with, I certainly didn't say no to happy hour, right? Because it's acceptable. But I was still hurting myself because when I would
Mhm.
go, I couldn't just have one, right? Everything I do is all or nothing. So, which is another reason I can relate, because I'm very intense and I know anything that I do is like full force. So I need to stay away from things like that. So it could have turned in the other direction. However, I was embarrassed because my friends, these is like a new group
Mhm.
of friends, and they just thought like I couldn't handle 10 miles, but really it was what I did to myself. So after that, I stopped drinking, like other than maybe a wedding or a birthday or something like that. So you mentioned that being sober doesn't necessarily mean from like drugs or alcohol. So I looked it
Mhm.
up, and there's lots of different definitions, right? But what stood out to me was that sober is moderate, self-controlled, no thrills, and losing the state of intoxication. So you can be intoxicated by distraction, by work, by shopping on Amazon. All of those things are intoxicating and take you away from your true self. So if you're sober, the no thrills is again, back to transpersonal, you don't need this false identity, right? You're raw, you're who you really are. And that's what sobriety is. So the book can apply to anyone in the sense that they may have that bad habit of going to happy hour too many times, or overworking or overeating. There's a
Mhm.
lot to it. And my friend Thomas Parks came to pick up his book today, and he said he's not in recovery. He said, but I could relate to this book because he has a Kindle version as well. So he started reading it. So yeah, he actually brought that up ironically today. I told him I'd give him a shout out because he reminded me to mention that it touches all lives.
Like relating to, what you were talking about, I'm thinking about maybe my bad habit, whatever that might be, and I'll talk about it later, how it's affected how I perform, the next day. And I know Lou has great stories about certain things because I know you've been um a veteran as well, and just working a lot too, like trying to get these behaviors specifically lined up so you can do the best performance. But sometimes those bad behaviors can like halt you, even though it feels like they're helping you at the time. And I think too, something that we accidentally do is, hey, I'm successful, so I can do this bad behavior for a little while. And what does successful really mean if you're just going to plummet yourself down into this hole of just doing this bad behavior? So that's what I just wanted to entail a little bit about what you were bringing up. And I also would love to share a little story about my bad behavior, and maybe Lou would like to too.
Let's
I
hear
mean,
it, Lou.
yeah, I mean, bad. It's one of those things, like you said, happy hour is socially acceptable. Eating is too. So growing up in an Italian household where food was the center of everything, food and family, was the center of everything. So you grow up with that as that's your norm. So, you start to get a little bit older, you hang out with your friends, you start to get less active, and you maintain that habit of getting together, overindulging, and it goes from, hey, on a Sunday when all the family is around, to every night. Next thing you know, that indulgence kind of takes over, and you don't really understand, what you're doing, you know, or maybe you do, and you're just kind of like, all right, I'm not going to pay attention to that right now. So, you know, that's a for me, that's always been a struggle. Is like, all right, what are my goals? What do I want to do? And is this fueling my goal, or is it going to be a setback? Am I going to regret this tomorrow because I didn't, enjoy something because of the taste and the texture or whatever it was? I went overboard and said, I'm just going to destroy this, entire sleeve of cookies or whatever it may be, right? So in the very same way, it's, it's harder well, I don't want to say it's harder. It's hard in a different way because it's socially acceptable. So
Right.
no one's out there saying, "Oh, you shouldn't do that," or few and far between anyway.
Mhm.
Now, Sarah, I can't wait to hear your story.
Well, I think food kind of holds a grasp on everybody. And I definitely had to go through my own journey of not having food taunt me to the point where like I overindulged at a party. Now I can look at the brownies and be like, nah, like it's not taunting me. They're not telling me, please eat me, please eat me. I've grown past that. But one of my behaviors that it's to this day, I'm literally going to be 31 very, very soon, and I am the worst person to get a good night's sleep. I don't go to bed on a normal time. Like if I have to get up at 5 o'clock, I'll stay up until about noon. I mean, not noon, midnight, 1 a.m. And it's an occurrence on me. And I know if I don't get enough sleep, I'm not going to be able to perform my best. But this has been a ongoing battle because I'm like, you know what? Like I can relax during the day between certain things. But in reality, I'm just starting to become lazy during my day compared to being productive. And that's one thing, like, I wish I could quote unquote sober up from being able to actually sleep and go to bed. Like, if I get up at 5 o'clock for a CrossFit at 6 a.m., I technically, to get a good night's sleep, I have to go to bed around 8:30. And I'm over here like, do I really want to go to bed at 8:30? And I'm just like, if I want to actually get a good workout in, like I desire that, I have to go to bed at a specific time to get my 8, 9 hours. So actually last night, I got 10 hours last night, but I was strict on it. I purposely, like, I saw the clock hit 8. I'm like, I'm going to start getting ready for bed because I know it's going to take me about a half hour to like adjust and all these other things. But I'm not consistent with it yet. There's something in my head that I'm still not doing it in moderation. So I just wanted to bring that story up because clearly when we talk about sober, everyone's like, oh, this doesn't relate to me. I'm not a drug addict. I'm not an alcoholic. But I'm sure any athlete out there is like, I know I should probably be recovering better. And those are certain things that we accidentally indulge because I'm successful, I can keep working through it. But how many injuries might you be having? How many restless nights do you have because you're not doing mobility and stretching? So that's kind of why I wanted me and Lou to share, because it might be able to relate to the general public if they think sober just means alcoholic.
Yeah.
And on that, just so how much of your research, Tara, when you were diving into this, did you, I mean, you kind of touched upon it, but I'm really curious to know. So, how much of it is where those folks that you interviewed, they were holding on to this identity of no, I'm a drinker. I like to go out and drink, or I like, whatever the case is. How much did that play a part in them, you know, finally facing the recovery?
I would say the majority. In fact, one of them said it took his divorce to realize he was an alcoholic. When his wife said, "You're an alcoholic," and he said, "You're right." And that was the first time he realized after years of destroying himself. So sometimes it takes that other person to say something, but I would say all of them, if close to all of them. I'm thinking of one that may not have had that experience, but yeah, I think that's a good point.
Yeah, I find it intriguing because I was recently listening to the book Atomic Habits, and one of the tactics that he uses is breaking the identity. Like when you feel like your identity is tied to something, if it's positive, hey, then that's great. You're forming a positive habit, but on the flip side, you could be forming a very negative habit and hold on to it for too long when it's not serving you anymore because you're so tied to that identity. So
Mhm.
I found
You
that
know, with
really
the
interesting.
it is interesting, and you just triggered a thought with the those who are in and out of the prisons. There's that identity as well.
Mhm,
Yeah.
That's their
mhm, like
posse if they involved with gangs, or that's a culture. That's like a mini culture.
right.
So if you identify with that and then you get out of prison, you're sober for a day and you have nothing else, what else are you going to, you're just going to go back to what you know, and that's what you identify with. So it's ironic that transpersonal psychology is like going beyond the identity. However, that's easier said than done, right? We can't always have a transcendent experience. We can't always peak experiences. I wish I could go to the world championships every single day and feel that way. It was amazing. So, but it's just not possible. So the key is, number one, what do you do when you don't feel that? You know, how do you moderate yourself and stay sober? How do you tell yourself, I can't always have these great moments? It's okay to be bored or not have a lot going on. And then two, because it's so hard to transcend the self, what's your new identity going to be? So that habit with that, the book, I read the book as well. If it's a negative identity, switch it with a positive. That's what I'm talking about with drug user, partier, whatever you think you're cool, or the gang mentality. Switch that to I'm a Spartan. That's why we say that, right? At the starting line, it's a new identity, and it doesn't have to be Spartan. Of course, that's my thing. I love Spartan and DEKA, but it could be yoga, which I
Whatever that
can't.
tribe is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just find,
Yep.
right. Tribe is another word. Find your community. Absolutely.
And with that identity piece, we talk about that all the time because, as everybody knows, like I'm also in psychology, more of the sports specific side, and we talk about athletic identity. And so many people have that kind of crisis, and it happens in the military, and it happens when you go through this massive transition, and it can be challenging to like feel like you're holding on to something that you might not be doing that much anymore. So another thing, like how can you change it into a positive? And another way is also being able to like forgive yourself in a sense. So like let's say with the athletic identity, you might not have to like forgive in a sense, but like let's talk about somebody that holds on to younger self. Maybe that person wasn't motivated, or that person had like a bad family situation and they're still holding on that. Being able to basically apologize and let older self take over and let younger self let go, that will also allow somebody to like release that identity. And I think some of the times like it's really hard for some people to um let go of that, and that's why people hit rock bottom. And that's one of the next questions I had to you. Why do you think people have to hit their lowest of lows to finally want to make that change?
That's a doozy.
Yeah.
So, well, there's
Gold star, Sarah.
right.
Thank you.
Have you ever heard of the hero's journey in psychology? So there's the hero where he goes through the trials and tribulations
Yeah.
and reaches rock bottom, like hell, so to speak, right? And the mission of that is to rise up, because then they realize who they really are and their own values. Something changes within them because of the tension and the conflict. And everyone's time is different. Some people, it takes a little bit more. And then the hero, he becomes a hero when he goes back home and brings it back home to his tribe, the lessons he's learned. So that applies to all these men and women in recovery. They might go down to their deepest steps, deal with whatever that trauma or pain is, rise up above, and then bring back the lessons. And a lot of them in the book always want to pay it forward. They always mention paying it forward, paying it forward. So the rock
Love it.
bottom, a little bit more about that. What worries me, and I keep thinking of addiction, right? Like when we talk about rock bottom, but what worries me is the person who gets to rock bottom, but is so intoxicated continuously that they can't even get the message that they're meant to learn to rise up out of it. You might be just so into the drug scene. I see people on the streets, it breaks my heart. You know, I do this run around the gym here in Redwood City, especially when I see women, right? They're vulnerable out there. Not that men aren't as well, but anyone just wrapped up on a corner at 9 o'clock in the morning. Like, what was their night like? And I just wish I could find that little window where they were conscious and to ask, like, why, like, or what happened to you? Gabor Mate, he's one of my favorite authors. He says, not why the addiction, why the pain. So, like, what happened to you? So a lot of it, the rock bottom, comes from pain. Maybe it just comes from having a good time and partying. And maybe it wasn't pain at all. You just like to be the cool, fun guy or gal. But I don't even know if I answered that, because I don't think I had to go to a rock bottom. So I am also very curious about that. Maybe someone in the book you could interview, and maybe they could tell you, oh, actually, they did tell me, the ones that were in prison, for
Yeah.
sure, multiple times, for sure. They were adamant that that's it. I don't ever want to be back in here again. But it wasn't their first rodeo, right? They were in prison a couple of times over. where maybe they just saw the cycle, they had a breakthrough, because you can't do drugs in prison. So maybe that was the consciousness being opened. You're not intoxicated. So yeah, that's one of the things that got them out of it. And then the gentleman whose wife said that he was an alcoholic.
For somebody to hit rock bottom, I think they finally realize either two things. One, they're hurting people around them,
Mm-hmm.
or two, they're finally tired of hurting themselves. Because I think a lot of the people, especially if you like hear somebody doing a bad habit for a while, it's like, well, I don't really like, nobody really cares about me. There's this weird persona that they put in their heads that they are allowed to do this because nobody really cares about their life, which is not true at all. There's a lot of people, if that person passes away, there's going to be a lot of grieving. But in the moment, at least when I noticed people that have more of an addiction, it's just like, well, if nobody cares about me, then why does it matter if I do this? And I think where people finally open up their eyes is when, like you talked about that divorce situation, it's like, wow, I just lost my whole entire life because of this one habit that I couldn't let go. And unfortunately, it's like a kick in the teeth with something like that. But they have to hurt somebody else for them to finally realize I'm not just hurting me, I'm hurting people around me now. And I think that's where that rock bottom feel. But like, why do we always have to get to that? And that's something that I'm also still
Yeah.
discovering. Like, and how do we not allow, like, if I have this information, how am I able to give somebody that information before they hit rock bottom? But it seems like everybody still has to learn on their own.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. Learning on your own, and everyone's rock bottom looks very different. And it's not like you said, always drugs or alcohol. It could be anything. So that's what I said. That's a doozy. That's a tough question to answer. And I think maybe everyone's answer will be different, but I can say, to your point of maybe someone pointing it out, like the gentleman's wife, one of the other men I interviewed said it was his mom. And he said she wasn't the first one to point it out, that I had a problem. But for some reason that day when she said it, I listened and I drove myself to rehab. So it does, but then they'll say never get sober for someone else, get sober for yourself. But we do care about people and we need each other. So sometimes it is that person who cares about you, even like you said, even if you think nobody does, there's always
Mhm.
someone. I care about those people on the street. I don't even know them. I can't tell you how many times I've cried, like like
Yeah.
went to my car and like hope nobody sees me. But yeah, it's heartbreaking to see that. So
Yeah, it really is. Now, something that I'm curious, because you both are veterans, I know that sometimes, like, let's talk about that identity crisis. Have you ever seen any of your friends where they, after they're out of this identity of being in the military army and they're a veteran, are they having a hard time transitioning into what normal life is? Can anybody like, elaborate on that? You and Tara and Lou, I think you guys would be great at answering this.
Lou, you first. I just talked for a long time there. You're
Yeah,
next.
it was a massive part. It was a very, very big part of who I was. So, I was on one side of the coin, I was very much looking forward to retiring from the army, and another side, I wasn't ready to be done. But, at the time, I was facing a divorce, and I was trying to fight for a relationship with my son. Still am to this day, and it's been over a decade. Um, and that identity, whether I knew that it was a good decision, it was the right decision for me and for, my son, my family, it was still hard, and it was still very hard to walk away from. So, without really it being spoken, out loud very often or acknowledged, yeah, I was definitely depressed, and was going to therapy more for the fact that I had lost a relationship with my son, but also at the same time, the identity that I had, it was actually two identities. So I lost the identity of being a soldier and a leader in that sense, and also to a degree, the identity of being a father. So, it's very easy to slip into negative thought patterns. And that's where Titan 6 actual and wanting to, find a way forward, where I had some positive things to to help other people, and focus on that, kind of replace those negative thoughts and potentially negative actions, and turn it around into, how can I take what I know and help other people, and let that focus kind of keep me on a better path. Definitely that, and my now wife and stepson as well, they are also a big part of getting me through that journey as well. Wasn't easy. It definitely wasn't easy, but I found another tribe. I found
Mhm.
strong relationships with Spartan, DEKA, Go Ruck, the Ruck Club, Titan 6 Actual, and friends that I've had for many years from college. And that's when you said, Tara, we're communal people. We're meant to be, with other people. There's definitely a reason. So, especially when you're around the right people. So that identity and finding a new tribe, finding the tribe that I wanted to, you know, that I wanted to choose and resonate with, was great because, finding Go Ruck and the Ruck Club community is like there was a lot of overlap. There were a lot of folks that were either prior service military, maybe they were still in. You got law enforcement, first responders, a lot of us that share a lot of the same personality traits. So for that, I felt very connected almost immediately. And so, you know, when there aren't a lot of events that were local, I was starting to slump again, and I was like, I gotta find another tribe, not to replace, but to augment it, and just fell into, thanks to a friendship with Mark Jones, fell into the Spartan DEKA side, and I'm so thankful for that.
The community support, like you said, is like everything. And you could be surrounded by a zillion and one people, but if there's one bad apple there, if you ever heard that type of theory of you put a couple pieces of fruit together and there's one bad apple, the other apples will start to get bruised. And people are the same exact way. If there's one person that has a sour attitude, it's going to basically set upon everybody else, and being able to find that tribe that fits your values and likes those same activities and so on and so forth, they will bring you up compared to bring you down. So that's awesome that you found your tribe and then you found another tribe and you're able to kind of interconnect them too, because it's nice that you can not just like doing one thing, meaning sport specific wise, I think it's fine. But with my mind, I get bored really easily, and doing a bunch of different things is very helpful. And having different tribes that I can connect with this group of friends in this way, and this group of friends in that way, and have that support, I think it's really important. And I think sometimes people lose sight of that, or sometimes people I don't want to say accidentally give up on them, but they feel like people have given up on them, so they give up on themselves. So, no, appreciate you sharing that story. Yeah, Tara, what about you? Because I also asked you that question.
So, uh, Spartan was also my tribe, and that I write about it a little bit in the book, where I knew I wanted to get out of the military. In my first race, I ran because a soldier said, "Hey, there's this thing called Spartan. I think you're really gonna like it." And anyone knows me, I'm pretty frugal. I'm like, I'm not paying like $100 to go run a race or something. So he was so insistent that I would love it. I guess he had done one or two before. I signed up. I didn't realize they had a sprint. It was in Tuxedo, New York. There was one on Saturday and Sunday. So of course I saw the first thing. I signed up Saturday, but he signed up for Sunday. So now I'm by myself. So I'm still in the military, right? So I go to the starting line, and there was a group of people with Team Red, White, and Blue shirts on. Are you familiar with that organization? So
Oh
I
yeah.
had mine on. Ironically, I didn't usually wear it because it's a little thicker. And when
Well,
you,
hey, what's up, Eagle?
yeah, right. So like they just embraced me. I was like, let's run together. It was I had no idea what I was getting into. So about a quarter of the way in, there was a young kid. He couldn't have been more than 16. We were a little bit faster than the rest of the group. And he's like, "Do you want to take off?" I'm like, "Yeah." So I didn't know them. I'm like, "Let's go." I'm a little competitive. So we took off and we ran the whole thing together. He waited for me a little bit because I had never seen any of the obstacles. And there's a picture of us also in the book crossing the finish line together, jumping over the fire. And I'll never forget, he said, wow, he's like, you should race elite. And I'm like, yeah, right. Like, elite, I just showed, I don't even know what I'm doing. I couldn't, I didn't have the grip strength yet or any of that. He's like, no, you're pretty fast. I think if you work on your upper body. So I never forgot him. I wish I had his name. I don't know who he is. But he inspired me. And again, it was the tribe. I remember thinking, I want to feel like this all the time. So
Mhm.
I knew, I guess, on a subconscious level that this was my new tribe. I had shed the army. I knew I was done. I was approaching 10 years. I had made up my mind that it wasn't the 20 I thought it was going to be. So then, like I said earlier about California, it just took off because it's everywhere here. And then I went back as you were talking, I was thinking about what Sarah said, like, why do people need to hit rock bottom? And I often wondered if people drawn to the military, to Spartan, to DEKA, I don't know if it's like we just have this grit about us, or maybe we have traumas and that's our way of healing the trauma. Because I don't want anything easy. I don't. I had a child, I had an older brother, wrestling, punching each other. I played sports my entire life. I kind of roughhouse, played in the mud. I can't do yoga. I can't. I've tried so hard, and I know it's so good for you. And I'm like, Sarah was saying, like, your brain, like, you need a lot. And I'm like, okay, it's like 2 minutes in, and I'm like, wow, I'm already bored. I got to go. So for me, Spartan is perfect, and DEKA is just
Mhm.
intense. And there's some research in the book, but more in the dissertation, about how actually running and pounding the pavement, the pressure on the ground releases trauma in the cells. And it's one of the best things that you can do for healing trauma you don't even know you have. I mean, we all, it's traumatic to be born. I mean, you're going through the canal, you're like, what's happening? Like, you're born traumatized, right? You're crying and like,
Yeah.
what is this world I'm in a hospital. So from then on, like, there's all these various traumas that we just store, we don't even know they're there. So people have crossed Spartan finish lines, marathon finish lines crying. DEKA, I've seen it there too.
Mhm.
So there might be something to that, with the rock bottom folks, that maybe they need a little more grit, and that's why they're attracted to Spartan. I don't know. That's another research week. Maybe we could do that together, Sarah.
Yeah, no, I like it. Now my gears are going like, because like you said, everybody has a different rock bottom. And even though like all these people are crossing this finish line, um, there's still, like you said, there's traumas that they are trying to release without even realizing that they're releasing it. And something that I was thinking about, just because with the sports psychology side on my side, I did a lot of research on like Simone Biles. Remember back in the I think it was the 2020 Olympics. She just was, it was called, she had the twisties, and she couldn't figure out exactly where she was while she was doing her movements. But what was holding her back was not her skill at all. It was all these childhood traumas that she just never really dealt with. And in that moment, it all happened and it all came spiraling to the point where for X amount of years of her training, she just couldn't do them anymore. And it was back to like, if anybody knows her history, her mom used to be a drug addict and her grandparents are now her parents. And she had some things happening with her, what's it called, whenever she was in her like boot camps and stuff, like the coaches were, um I think one of the coaches was sexually assaulting, it was like one of the PTs there, and that was happening behind the scenes, but nobody talked about it because like she's, the star of the Olympics per se. And when she went to 2020, I think what happened was her parents weren't able to be in the audience with her, and that made everything spiral. Like, my support system is not there. I worked so hard to have this, and all these other things happened, and that was her rock bottom. And it's funny to say that because like people think, oh, these Olympians, they don't have any problems. No, they're fighting their own demons all the time. The only thing that's different with them is that they're able to push through to get that performance, and then maybe they deal with it in a different sense. Maybe they go home and like kind of shelter themselves. But yeah, that rock bottom, it comes in very various of forms, and we got to see hers at least in action. And that's why I like to bring it up, because if you want to go, back to the 2020 Olympics, you can watch it. And she has a documentary too that she talks it all about. And I'm over here taking notes like, this is so interesting. um, but sorry, I accidentally rambled a little bit. With that, I just wanted to because like the premise of our podcast is, beyond the finish line. Like we hear all the good things that you're doing right now, but let's go past that finish line and let's talk about, like, you talked about your 20s being a hard time. So like, is there anything that like maybe not many people know about you, that behind the finish line, the fact that you're able to do all this stuff now, what did you have to do to like get to that point?
So you're asking two questions, like what did I go through, like the hard times of the 20s, and what did I do to push out of that? Like maybe
Yes.
my own traumas. Okay.
Yes.
Well, I think
Your origin story turned
Yes.
hero story.
I'm 50 now, so let me try to make it cliff notes. Remember in the 80s? I'll give you the cliff note, because that's all. I can't
Yes, I'm
believe I
right
had
there
to,
with you.
right? So I didn't even read, like in high school. I would literally turn around and ask the girl. I shouldn't say this, but let me stop right there. I didn't read a lot. Let's just say that. But I made up for it. I made up for it with the PhD. So, but anyway, as a young kid, I was a super tomboy. No surprise, right? So I was always teased, tomboy, tomboy, and all kinds of other names, and because I would be hitting home runs playing wiffle ball, like just crushing it over the fence. And my brother was 5 years older than me, and he could barely hit like a line drive. Hopefully, he never listens to this. But so then not only would they tease me, I'd get back and my brother would beat the crap out of me. So I had to learn how to be strong. He was 5 years older and pretty big. So I remember thinking, man, I can't even be myself. This is so dumb. Like I wasn't even like crying about it. So I talked to my mom one day. I'd had enough. It was like one day in the summer, one of the boys said it. And she said, you tell them the reason they're calling you that is because you can beat them at any sport they can name. I'm like, well, that's not, I can't play tennis. I remember thinking like, that's not true. But I said it the next time a kid said it in school, because they would say it in school too. And everyone goes, oh, snap. Like that was a thing back then. They're like, oh, and he never teased me again, ever again. So that was part of it. I struggled a bit with my identity, because then the girls started wearing pocketbooks and makeup. And I remember saying, my dad, I don't want to wear makeup. I just want to play. And he said, you be you, you shine from the inside out. He passed in 2018. Um, but it was the best advice ever. He said, you shine from inside. If you don't want to wear makeup, you don't need to. You're beautiful from in here. And I never forgot that. And I still don't wear makeup unless it's someone's wedding and they make me do it. Then I'll do it.
Right. Amen, sister. Same.
Yes, that's right. I'll do it for the good of the friend, and that's it. So that identity thing of like I have to be girly now, and I'm a woman. I don't feel like I have to look like a certain woman to get through life, and that's how I felt. Like, why
Mhm.
did I have to be a tomboy? Why couldn't I just be the nice girl next door that can hit the ball over the fence? But it wasn't like that back then. So I struggled a lot with that, and then my 20s came, and Sarah, you mentioned this to me before about losing the athlete identity. Now it was really gone, because I graduated high school, went to college. It wasn't as important in college. It kind of was, but I was more meeting friends and like, what am I going to do for the rest of my life while playing sports? Then I graduated, and now I was completely lost.
Yeah.
Never like drank a lot at all. That's where like the happy hours and all that. I had no idea where to go. Like, who was I? So talk about identity loss. So how did I rise up out of that? A friend of mine got me into running. So here we go, right back to sports, which is why I'm so passionate
Right.
about movement. We're born to move. I think there's a book by that name or something. Born to
I
Run or
think so
something.
too.
Mhm.
Something
Something
like,
like that. Yeah.
somebody out there knows the book, but it was I could barely make it. It was like 4 miles. I was dying. I felt so bad. I was like, you don't have to wait for me. She's like, no, no, she waited for me. And she was the one that got me into the marathons. Wound up doing 13 marathons. joined the military, and when I got in the military, they only care if you can run 2 miles. So then,
2 miles.
yeah, that was it. So I went from marathons to 2 miles, but I was very much focused on fitness as well, all throughout my military career. And then we talked about going into Spartan. So physical activity is what got me out of everything. Even when it was painful, when my brother was beating me up, I just learned, how do I get stronger? How do I get my quads? I didn't know they were called quads, but I just knew, how do I get this part of my leg strong enough so I could kick him off? And I did a bunch of times. And then I just said, wow, I'll just get faster. He can't catch me. So I never really, I think I had kind of that mindset anyway, even when the boys were calling me tomboy. I always had this inner strength that my mom encouraged it, where you are not going to put me down. Although I put myself down and went through a lot, I still had that little voice that says you're worth something. And I think when you're at your rock bottom, like we were talking about earlier, if someone could just tell you you're worth something, like you said, that person who loves you, or you can tell yourself that, then there's hope. So,
Yeah. I think it's really important, that you have to feed those positive thoughts and feelings, the affirmation. You have to put that in your body, in your mind, long before you really need it, because when you need it, you just need to be able to call upon it, right? It's just like it's like physical fitness, right? You don't hope that the day of an event that you're going to be able to do it. You need to prepare, right? So for me, it takes a lot of for me, I'm religious, so I pray a lot, and I use that so that when something does, start to weigh down on me, I have that to reflect back on and think about, just like I use physical fitness. So it's just very important to have to start to develop that, even when you feel like everything is going great.
And I like how you brought up, like, what do you know? Like, I got back into running after doing all these sports when I was younger and now doing sports again. Something that I think saves a lot of people is like, let's talk about that identity. You kind of lost it, but basically you reformed it in a different sense. Like, you're doing those Spartans and you're doing the DEKAs. So not the same style, but the same kind of, it's a familiar, let's call it that. And I think too, when it comes to this world, it's like, let's say somebody wants to be an actor and they go to Hollywood and they're trying everything in their power to be an actor, but we know how, difficult it is to get into that space. They lose their identity of like, man, I really want to be this actor and I'm not worth it because they aren't valuing me. But how can we replace that with something a little bit more, it's similar but different. So why I'm saying this is, like, nowadays everybody's kind of like a influencer, and they're their own actor, they're their own producer, they're their own content creator. So if they're not an actor in Hollywood, they're able to find another outlet and be like, I'm doing the same thing, just not with the Hollywood name. And when you were talking about sports, like you were, what was your sport when you were younger? You
soccer
said
and
marathon,
softball.
soccer
Oh,
and
like a little
softball.
kid, soccer and softball, but then
Yeah.
marathons were in my 20s.
Yeah, marathon. So like generally some type of running endurance. And we all know that Spartan and DEKA is also endurance, but just in a different form. Like you're running on mountains. I don't know if your marathons were always on mountains, and then the DEKA's having that strength output on it. So I'm just saying, like, with that, being able to, like, I don't have this identity, but what can you do now that this world is available, like gives you this availability, and how can you basically move that identity over in a different form and just redefine it a little bit? So like when you were talking about that, that's what I was thinking of, like what's something familiar that you want to continue on, because we don't have to completely scrap that identity. We just need to refine it. And when you started running these DEKAs and Spartans, do you feel like it was redefined in a different sense?
Yeah, that's a great question again, because there was a moment, I think, what are we now? 2024, 2022 and 2023. I actually questioned if fitness was really my choice, or just because I had an older brother and sports were kind of just there. Of course, he's playing football and stuff, and I had to
Yeah.
be strong to like outrun him. Like, where did that come from? So I actually did an evaluation. I burned myself out. I was actually running so much and doing so many things. I did not do well at the World Championships. I just crashed, kind of like Simone Biles. I self-destructed almost intentionally because I didn't want to face the fact that I didn't think I liked it anymore. I was like the military. It was hard for me to get out.
Yeah.
Whether you're retiring or getting out early, I'm like, I, I don't know if I want to shed this identity. I just questioned who I was as an athlete, if I even cared anymore. So I kept saying to my friend, I don't want to compete anymore. I'm so tired of competing. I'm tired of the pressure. I just want to have fun. And then I'd show up anyway, and then I would not win. And then I would it was almost like I was hurting myself because I just wasn't sitting
Yeah.
down to say, Tara, how do you feel? And I think to answer your question, you have to sit still. As much as I hate saying that, because I hate sitting still, you have to be still, whether it's prayer, it's counseling, walking in nature. And I'm not talking running a Spartan race, just chill out, take your dog out
Mhm.
and find out who you are. Tap into that inner wisdom and the higher consciousness we were talking about with transpersonal psychology, because no one can answer that question but you. My mom could say,
Right.
oh, yeah, of course you're an athlete. She saw me at 3 years old doing dips in the backyard and nobody taught me how to do dips. Like, she could say that, but that might not necessarily be true. Maybe I was just like, oh, what's this? Like, that doesn't make me an athlete. It's what I feel inside of me. So I think people need to ask themselves. So what I did was I worked through it, not in the right way. If I could do it again, I would have sat still, maybe got a counselor and really just asked, like, what is this new chapter of my life? So then I came back strong and I said, that's it. Instead of trying to be every athlete in the world, the trail runner, the Spartan racer, the DEKA, I focused solely on DEKA, went to the world championships, and it was the best time ever. I have 5 team podiums with my partner,
Nice.
Olga and Edward. I tried the rock, but that didn't work out so well. Maybe this year. So,
Yeah, that's right. This
and
year, it's
that's
your
right.
year.
2025. But it's no mistake, too, that I podiumed with my friends. Because again, for me, to get back my identity, I wanted to know I had like a group, a tribe to go to, right? So if it was still going to be DEKA and Spartan, I knew that tribe was there. But what if I shed that identity? Like you said, I shed that and got a brand new one.
Yeah.
Um, I went through a lot, but yeah, so I think people need to ask. It's a very personal question, and they need to take time to figure out who they are and who they want to be and why is that too. The why is a good
Yeah.
question.
So it's really awesome because it's like synchronicity, things that I've seen recently, heard recently, and then having these conversations, which are so enlightening. It's like uh, we have lost the ability, so many of us, I don't want to make a statement like it's everybody, but so many of us have lost the ability to stop and just enjoy the perspective that comes with silence,
Mhm.
listening and just thinking and not being distracted, whether it's our phones or TV or whatever the distraction is, right? Because sometimes just the things that we do, and even if it is, something that's positive, taken too far can be a negative. So even those sports can be a distraction from you taking the time to self-reflect. So my brother would say, when I was training for New York City Marathon, he was like, go out and run without any headphones. You'll do your best thinking. You'll really like, it's painful at first when you really enjoy music, but man, then the problem was I'd have so many thoughts and I just wish I had the ability to write them down.
Right.
So
Yeah.
you talked about having questions like asking questions of yourself. And I came across this post a while back that talked about, deep questions that will help you reflect. One of them was, what commitment have you made that you really no longer believe in? And I thought that's a powerful question because, to your point, it's like, hey, is this, sport serving me anymore? Am I just doing it and going through the motions? And I was like, wow, that's really, because how many times have you found yourself where you're like struggling to shed that identity, whatever it is, good, bad, or indifferent, or activity or friendship, whatever it is. And it's just like, wait a minute, if I just stop for long enough to ask myself that question and then listen, yeah, you might
Yeah.
just get that answer.
Yeah. I like that. And while we were talking about just having a moment of peace, I'm thinking about this world right now where social media is everywhere. Like there is no moment of uh, peace, because if we're not staring at our laptop screens, we're going to stare at our phone screens, and if we're not looking at our phone screens, we're looking at a TV screen, and we might be not thinking hard, but there is not really a moment of peace. It's just called distraction. And then I was thinking back to like when we were talking about different addictions other than just drug and alcohol. One of the things about, I think, in this world too, that makes it difficult is, let's just talk about the fast food industry. Like, imagine if somebody just went to a restaurant and just sat by themselves, had their phone on the table, and they just looked at what was going on in the restaurant. That doesn't really happen anymore. If somebody has to eat by themselves, they rather go through a quick fast food drive through. And guess what? It's quick and easy and convenient, but that's what the person is addicted to, convenience. So they could hurry up and go do whatever they want to do. Is it really making them do things faster? I'm sure they're just rushing home to go watch more stupid TV on their phone or like on their laptop, whatever it is. So is it really convenient? Fast food's supposed to be helpful so you can get more done, but all it does is make us more lazy. So those are the two
And more
things that
sick.
really. Say that again.
And more sick.
Yeah, and more sick. Yeah, like when it comes to social media that drains your battery, when we talk about fast food, it just, doesn't sit with you well, because we all know it's just a rock in your stomach, all the amount of chemicals those fast food have. And if we just, like you said, have a moment of peace, and it doesn't have to be like something crazy, like everyone's like, oh, I can't meditate, or like how you talked about yoga is really difficult for you. Okay, what's something that you can just do and just like go sit on a picnic table and just eat your lunch and just don't have any technology with you. Don't listen to anything. Don't preoccupy your mind, and just be aware of what's going on. Like you said, like if you didn't have music in your while you were running, you do your best thinking, and that's a simple way to do it as well.
I have a
Yeah, because
great
once you
example.
start running, you're like, all right, now I'm screwed. I
That
can't
too,
run back
right?
and go get it.
That
It
too.
forces you to think. Sorry, Tara, I didn't mean
Oh
to
no,
cut
oh
you off.
no, no, that's fine. And I can relate to the I don't say I don't like music. I never have music on though, unless somebody else wants it. So I have never run with music. I don't
Oh,
like it at all because I like to think. I like thoughts and all that stuff, which obviously I overanalyze everything, which is how I got through all this research. But I appreciate people who enjoy music, because then when I do hear it, like a rock and roll half marathon, I'm like, yes. That, and actually, so that's what I mean. It's not that I don't like it. It's just not a part of my routine, or my running for that matter. But anyway, what I was going to say, I had an example from today. I went to the dog park before I met with you two. So my Sparta is my little one. She has a lot of energy. So I had to run her
yeah.
around. I was the only person in that dog park not on my cell phone. Why are you
Yeah.
at the dog park with your dog? So I'm actually at the dog park to be with my dog so I can throw the ball. So there was a particular individual on the phone, turned away. It was like fenced in, right? Facing away from the park, like looking out in the horizon on the phone, and her dog kept stealing Sparta's ball. So I'm
Mm,
like, I don't know who owns this dog. And the dog is prancing around. I don't want to, it's like a German Shepherd. I'm like, I'm not going to grab the ball. Sparta's scared because she's tiny. So
yeah.
finally I said, she turned around. I was like, is that your dog? She's like, yeah. I'm like, he has our ball. She's like, I'll get it. Still on the phone. She finally gets the ball. I swear to you, 10 more times this dog took the ball. And she never like paid attention to her poor. No wonder why he was stealing the ball. He wanted to play with someone. And then I looked around and everyone's on their phone, texting or like this. So
Mhm.
I just was like, wow, I am so glad that like I've at least come that far that I can be present with my animals and eating as well. I don't
Right.
I first of all, I have a television here. I never once turned it on. I haven't had a television about 6 years. I eat no television. I might look on my phone briefly, but I eat and just have my dogs nearby. And then when I'm done eating, then I go do my stuff. Because I read a book on
Mhm.
mindful eating once and it stuck with me. So I try
Yeah.
not to do anything else.
Yeah. Mindful eating, mindful walking, just simple things like that. And uh, I want to go back to like when you're talking about the dog park, how everybody was on their phones. I went to a CrossFit class on a Saturday morning, and the members brought their kids because they didn't have school at the time. And mind you, like I'm traveling all over the world where every CrossFit gym is a little different. But this one blew my mind. There was four kids in the corner. Guess what they were doing?
on
On
their
their
phone.
tablets, on their phones. They did not say a single word to each other. I saw one little girl, I'm not kidding you, she was in the corner on her phone like this, already getting text neck and stuff. And I don't even know how old these kids are. I don't want to like maybe 8 at oldest, but it just blew my mind. I'm like, this is what this world is coming to,
It,
that these kids won't even have a like they could have been friends. They could have just said hi to each other and just played a game with each other, but they didn't.
I guarantee you in the next 10 years, this sober up Spartan style is going to apply to all the social media addicts
Yeah.
or technology addicts. It's terrible. Matter of fact, Joe DeSena just made a post the other day where it showed a graph bar chart, and it was showing, how much time we as individuals focused on, over the years, and it had family at the very top, social media at the bottom, and all the various things, coworkers, friends, sports, whatever, right? And you just over the years, and it showed it from, I think early 1900, like 1920s, I think it was, maybe it was over the course of the last 100 years, and it just showed how like we hit this point where as soon as it was like, I don't know, 94, when social media, well, not social media, but the internet, first came to be, and it was like, man, you see it climbing up the chart, and then it's just exponential growth, and then family just all the way down. It's crazy. This is literally what we've replaced our live interaction and meaningful conversations and meaningful relationships with
Mhm.
is screen time, and it's terrible. And I'm guilty of it too at times, and I have to remind myself.
Yeah.
I
And
think there's good in social media if we use it for the right
yeah.
way, because maybe, I mean, we connected in person, Lou, but I've met a lot of people online, like Jonathan Hastings.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
It's
somebody
it's just it's a tool, it's a resource, and like anything else, it's now it's like the tail wagging the dog. So it's like,
yeah,
yeah, it's a great resource, and the problem is, it's like, and this is where I'm guilty of it, is like, my phone will do everything from, like it's everything in our hands. It's our phone book, it's our calculator, it's our source of, humor, it's our connection, so to speak, through Facebook. But for me, it's
Yeah.
also a business tool. It's how I, engage with Titan Six Actual in the community. So it's like it becomes all these things, and it makes it that much harder to put it down, right? And like I heard, and I'm trying to figure out how to do this. And that's like, okay, if I had a device that's only for work, a device that's only for pleasure, or one that's like literally just for communication, and then it's just like, okay, it's down. It's kind of like my work phone. I have my, my daytime work phone. It's like, yeah, when that's my work day is over, that's off. It's off to the side. It's very much the same thing. It's like we have to find a way to separate those worlds somehow.
What you're saying too, it's like a source of being able to connect with people. It's like everybody's rather busy and wanting to see, especially with these races, like, hey, I didn't get to go to this race, so I want to go see what my friend did, and I know they're going to post on social media. So like there's a massive support system when it comes to that. But what I'm thinking about is like we start to connect with people that don't live close to us and we value them a lot, and I think we should value them, but then we lose touch with the people that are next to us. You know what I mean? Like another situation, the kids one just blew my mind because they were younger than 8, but I saw a bunch of teens sitting at a like at BJ's restaurant, all on their phones. I'm like, are they texting each other? Because like they're all hanging out. Like, shouldn't they? I sound like my mom when I say that. Are you texting each other across the table? Um, but still, I'm like, they went out to eat, to hang out with their group of friends, and they weren't even having a conversation. And then I think back to like back when I was in high school, and it wasn't that long ago compared to apparently you guys, like I'm the young one here. Um, I graduated in 2012, and I'm just trying to imagine how maybe one of those dances, like I remember going to prom and not a single person even brought their phone. They had these little cameras that everybody was taking photos with, but I don't remember anybody being on their phone. And nowadays, like you said, everybody's just always so submerged in that. So just because we're like on the hot topic of social media, how can somebody get this support from their community without being a part of social media so heavily? Like I think that's a great question for us to all
Mhm.
brainstorm.
Yeah, it that's a tough one because most of the Spartan community that I know, well, I probably met them in person because I've traveled the country to a lot of them and then became friends on Facebook. But then they had a friend of a friend of a friend. So, oh, yeah, I would say the majority are people I probably never met. Right. And I'm in all these Spartan groups: East Coast, West Coast, South, North,
Yeah.
Sober Spartans, which is a great Facebook group. So I think it is a healthy thing in that respect. I love connection. When I got out of the military, I can still connect with everyone. My friend had a baby. I'm so happy I got to
Yeah.
see that. But I'm also not addicted to it, or it's not replacing anything for me personally, but I see the issue that we're having. So I don't, other than showing up at a race and like actually talking to people, you can't, well, I don't race with my phone. No way. I guess people do, huh? I
They
don't know. I
do.
can't
Yeah.
answer that question because I think you can only meet so many people in person. And it sounds like I'm like a promoter of social media, and I am to a degree, but I don't think it should replace human connection. So, for instance,
Yeah.
the one thing I'm guilty of is if I'm going, say a doctor's appointment at the VA, and oh, we'll be right with you. I say, okay, no problem, because I have my phone. And immediately I'm like this. It's almost like there's no room to feel inadequate for a second. Like when you're standing alone, waiting on a line, you're like, I'm awkward. I'm like, okay, I don't know any of these people in the waiting room, and it's like weird. So the
Yeah.
phone, and that's why I think kids do it. The phone is the easiest like safety net. So I'll
Yeah.
just start. I don't even have anything to do on my phone. I just don't want to look stupid standing waiting by myself. Like, why am I insecure about that? I couldn't even tell you. But so it does that for me, I guess. But I don't know. Maybe you can answer that better. How we can make more connections without social media and you
Yeah.
can't get rid of it. I don't think.
No,
Well,
I mean it's a
no.
tool like anything else. It's just that mindfulness and focus on being present. It's like, okay, if there was a, you know, if there was just a way to remind ourselves that when we're in the moment, when we're with someone else, when we're with a group, when we're in a situation where being mindful and 100% present to be able to turn off the phone, put it in airplane mode, whatever the case may be, so that it's like, it's like going to dinner and not putting your phone on the table immediately, which
Mhm.
subliminally sends a message like, yeah, you're important until my phone rings,
Mhm.
or there's a beep or a buzz, right? So if we can work on breaking that habit, myself included, uh, I think we'll all be better for it. We'll all have more real connections again.
Mhm. And something that I'm thinking, like Lou, what you did, like you were talking about, you wanted to do all those races, rucking specifically, but they were kind of far away. You literally made a community around you to be able to do the same thing. So now you have
Oh
that
yeah,
community close by, which that's
it was
awesome.
selfish.
Yeah. Well,
I was like, well, I'm standing it up. That's it.
it's okay to be selfish in that sense because now you can disconnect from having that social media type of community. And I think it's amazing. And something that like I'm thinking about Tara and I, because we're both in RVs. As people know, I use the virtual background just because I don't know what my RV looks behind me every time. So we're just going to stay consistent with this. But we can meet people at these races and we can follow them on social media, but we also can make connections like, hey, I'm in Arizona right now. Where are you? And I'll go come, drive 30 minutes to an hour and we can hang out and do something outside of racing. So maybe we can have a deeper connection than just this camaraderie of being at Spartan races, which is still fantastic. But still, like, how do we pass that? And while we're talking about it, like, this is difficult. I agree with you. Like, I don't get to see my friends all the time because I'm originally from the East Coast. All my friends are from Pennsylvania and Ohio, and they're kind of homebodies. So if I want to see them, I have to go to them. They're not going to come visit me because, I mean, it's expensive to come travel for a couple of days on the West Side if you're on the East Coast. But how do you make those connections? And while RVing, I do get to have that community where maybe I'm not going to see you for like a year because I travel all over the place, but I'll say right now that I have a community in St. Augustine in Florida that every time we go in that area we have a gym and we love their support and we still talk to this day. But of course right now it's through social media, but we get to have that extra connection outside of the gym and like, okay, let's go do a beach day. Okay, like they do a running club, which they always talk about CrossFitters not running, and then I'm over here not the best runner, but since I do endurance sports, they're like, "How are you able to run so easy?" I'm like, "Florida is so flat, guys. Like, I'm used to mountains now." But still, that's what I was kind of thinking of, like, how can we get out of this, like, always in this social media bubble and expand it a little bit.
Well, now that you mentioned the RV thing, I also felt inundated by the screen too. Those years I was telling you I was burned out. I went back to school to become an addiction counselor. A
Yeah,
lot of it was on Zoom, obviously Canvas, Blackboard, if you're familiar with that. I'm doing everything
yeah.
online. There was like one class in person. And I was just so tired of looking at the computer. So for my 50th birthday, I wanted to do something epic anyway. And I think I told you last time we spoke, I flew across the country to New York, bought a camper van and went down the coast and saw every childhood friend that I could get a hold
Oh,
of along the way. My
yeah.
elementary school best friend, one of the high school girls I played softball with, um, one of the girls in my neighborhood, of course, my mom and my brother. And I posted, now here comes social media. So people knew I was doing that because I don't have their phone numbers. And if I did, I wouldn't remember it because we don't remember phone numbers anymore like we had to when we were little. So that's
Right,
another
yeah.
thing. So that's how I reached out to them. So that's how I see the benefit. And I was able to say, hey, I'll be in South Carolina on this date. Got to see my best friend there and my aunt and my cousins or she's in Georgia. They're in South Carolina. So I had this wonderful trip, and I have to tell you, I only posted on social media because my friends were like, "Hey, report your journey." So I'm like, "Okay." Took some pictures of the dogs. Like Sparta likes to drive, so she's in the front. But the best part about that trip was I was barely on my phone, just other than that, to make connections, and it was the people that I met. It wasn't
Mhm.
even the adventure solo, me and my dogs going across the country because there's a lot of experiences. Yeah, I love the mountains and all the scenery was great. Great. It was the people. I couldn't
Yeah.
wait to get to the next person. So we to answer your question, I think we need to leverage maybe social media to make those connections with people like you with your RV. Say, hey, I'll be in Florida again, I'll be in Arizona, I'll be here, I'll be there, and use it for that good to make sure we meet in person. And even when I
Mhm.
went to Florida the week before the DEKA World Championships, there was a DEKA. So I went to a gym, met a whole group of people. It was one of the best gyms I've ever been to. And I told them if I lived here, I would so go to your gym. Then they saw
Mhm.
me at Worlds. They're like, hey, Tara. And like, we were like best friends. So
Right.
back to Spartan and DEKA, instant friendship, at least for me, instant tribe. Like I met them literally, I was there for a couple hours. And it was
Yeah.
like they were inviting me to their house for dinner and for Christmas. Like it just,
Right.
it's wonderful. So I think you can
Yeah.
leverage social media and now I can keep those connections with them too. So
Yeah,
we just need
Yeah.
absolutely.
to moderate it. It might be harder with the kids. I don't have kids. I can't imagine. Um, But yeah, we'll get there. I think the more we realize it can be damaging.
Yeah. Well, the whole time you were explaining it, like if we're going back to the word sober, it's to do anything without having to be an addict, you do it in moderation. So I guess like the moral of the whole story of us talking about this, it's like social media is great, but how can you disconnect? And it seems like we gave a couple great ways. Like, yes, clearly you had to contact people throughout social media, but then you had an in-person connection where I know there's some people out there that they have a best friend or maybe even a significant other that they never met. They're just online. It's just like,
Yeah.
maybe meet somebody in person and then call them your best friend or significant other.
Right.
Like how can we make this a moderation? And it sounds like you're doing a great job with it. Like you're able to be present, but you can also use it as a tool and a resource to be able to, do what this world is kind of designed to be like now.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for noticing that. I love people and I don't know. And like Lou immediately, I was like scared to come over to the tent with the card. I was like, oh, he's going to say no. You just looked intimidating. I'm like, I'm not going to go over there. But
He's
I heard
scary,
of you.
isn't he?
Yeah. I was like, oh no, he might be mean. I'm
Oh,
not sure.
wow.
But I knew
Oh, wow.
Olga had talked about you and said you were really nice, but I also didn't want to be presumptuous and like Yancey had said I could do it, I could pass him, but I felt like I don't know, I didn't want to be like boastful, like here, take my card with this book, like. But I wanted to spread the word while I was there, and that is my ultimate goal of the book is to get this in as many hands as possible to people in the rehab centers, mental health
Yeah.
facilities, and even the VA. Lou, when you were talking, I'm like I keep focusing on recovery centers having like a bridge between them leaving the
Yep.
recovery center and finding Spartan and DEKA. The military too. That's a perfect tribe for them. So
Absolutely.
I'm going to
Absolutely.
start knocking on their door. I know there's already connections with the military, but I'm talking about the transition programs.
Yeah.
Throw
Yeah. Absolutely.
throw that in there as a
Especially,
resource.
yeah, absolutely. Gosh, there is well, the military one source is obviously one resource that comes to mind. Like if you get in with someone over there, maybe they have like a packet or program or a web link for soldiers that are about to transition. I know there was a retirement transition, like I don't want to say a course. It was like a 1 day thing where I had to go travel and listen to, a bunch of small, like, how the military loves like slideshows and they have, 15 different people showing like, oh, when you're transitioning, you're like, okay, so, if there's a program like that, there's got to be a way to get your resource out there. And I think, this is a perfect segue, before we close up is like, what are the ways that people can find your book, purchase your book, and how can they reach you on social media, website, whatever the case. Shameless
Yeah.
plugs. Get it all
Okay.
out there.
Okay. So they can it's on Amazon, Sober Up Spartan Style. So if you just type that, I tested it. If you just type it in the search engine, it'll pop up. That's one way, or my website, tarapipia.com. That's very basic. It's just a landing page at the moment, but it has the link to Amazon. Or they can
Okay.
reach out to me directly on Instagram or Facebook. I'm usually on Facebook. Um,
Okay.
and then I can order an author copy, have it shipped to me, sign it, and then get it back to them. Or if they live close by,
Oh,
I can do
great.
that too. So I love signing
Yeah,
them. It
yeah.
takes me forever. Like here's one to give you. You don't have to read the writing, but all that in there.
Nice.
Nice.
So when
Wow.
I write
And
in
so
there,
paperback, obviously, and
yeah,
any other
paperback.
format? Paperback. Okay,
Thanks
very
for
good.
asking. Kindle.
And
Yeah.
Kindle. All right,
Yep.
perfect, perfect. And social media, what's your handle on social media?
Well, Instagram is Decadog,
Instagram,
Spartan
Decadog,
Decadog.
Spartan
Uh,
Decadog.
yeah,
Okay,
Spartan Decadog, and then Facebook is just my name, Tara Pipia.
got it. Okay,
Mhm.
all right, awesome.
Well, now we kind of didn't talk about this.
Yeah,
Yeah, you know exactly what I'm gonna
I
Oh,
say.
do. I do.
oh
Well,
boy.
yeah, we kind of forgot
Surprise.
to, yeah, let you know on this. We haven't had great success just yet. When we first started the podcast, it was rolling really well, and then we just got a bit of a halt on this. But anyways, what we've been doing is we've been asking our guests if they could pick one person, maybe it's a role model, somebody very special to them. If they pick them, would like to be our guest on our next episode? And if they are willing to do that, what kind of question would you ask them? So when we get on our next episode, we can ask your crafted question to them.
Oh, that's neat. I like that. Do you need the answer right now, or is this something I give you later?
Well, since we didn't give you the the prep work, I think you
Yeah,
can
we failed.
get back to us on it. Yeah, we feel bad.
You didn't fail. I'm quick. I have like 5 names in my head already. I just don't know what kind of like genre, I
Well,
guess, like what kind of
yeah.
topic. So
I mean, so obviously with the premise of being breaking barriers beyond the finish line, using all these different, taking people's stories that maybe aren't aren't necessarily original in the sense of like, how many people talk about overcoming addiction or cancer or whatever, but everyone says their message in a slightly different way, and maybe that way is going to reach someone that heard it for the millionth time, but the way you approached
yeah.
it resonated, right? So that's why we're willing to take on any genre as long as you're bringing something to the table that hopefully can help people, through that story, or in your case, your book, and the various stories that tangentially, as we started talking, just kind of happen, which is awesome. So that's really the only criteria.
Okay. Well, I have 2 in the top of my head. One is Bryce Johnson. Mark knows him, and he rocks a lot. He's going to be, I think, Mark's supporter on his huge
He is for the
rock
Guinness World
adventure.
Record attempt. I'll be out
Okay.
there too. I'll be supporting
Excellent.
Mark. Yep.
So then
Yeah.
you'll meet Bryce. So Bryce Johnson has a
Yep.
great story.
We.
Say again. You met
Yep.
already?
Yep. We got to. Yeah. I
Okay.
mean, through a video call, but yes. Yep.
Okay. So if he qualifies, the question I would have for Bryce
Okay.
would be, what is your why for being sober? What's your
Okay, very
why?
good. I think it'll be fantastic interview. Sarah, I've already, I have spoke with him. I kind of got a little bit of the story because we had a crew call
Okay.
a couple weeks back to kick off getting ready for Mark's attempt. And yeah, I think that would be awesome. And I could easily reach out to him and invite him on the show.
That's great. I'm happy
Yeah.
that it could help.
See, synchronicity.
That's right.
Yes. Sounds like a good candidate.
Mm-hmm. He is.
Well, other than that, Tara, it was great to, dive a little bit deeper, go a little bit beyond the finish line, just understand like what inspires you to be who you are now. And of course, the community you've created with all this Spartan DEKA, so on and so forth life. But we really appreciate you being our guest today. And on that note, everybody keep breaking barriers, and we'll see you at the finish line. Stay tuned, guys, for next episodes, and we'll see you there. Take care. Bye.
Joining us on this exhilarating journey through resilience, determination, and the pursuit of excellence. As we wrap up this episode of Breaking Barriers Beyond the Finish Line, remember that the finish line is really just the beginning. Keep pushing your limits, breaking down walls, and reaching for the stars. So whether you're an athlete, an entrepreneur, or simply someone seeking inspiration, know that you have the power to go beyond what you thought it was possible.
If you enjoyed today's episode, hit that subscribe button and stay tuned for more captivating stories, expert insights, and practical tips. And don't forget to share this podcast with fellow dream chasers and barrier breakers. Until next time, this is Grip and Lou signing off. Keeping breaking barriers, my friends. Remember, it is not about the finish line. It's about what lies beyond it, and it starts with you.